Let us get started. Welcome to tonight's 2023 repaving meeting in the Sully District. My name is Zach Desjardins. I work at the Fairfax County Department of Transportation, and I want to welcome you to this meeting. Before we begin, I'd like to review some guidelines so that everyone can participate and get the most out of this session. Please note this meeting is being recorded and will be posted to YouTube, then linked to the 2023 repaving webpage. Microsoft Teams does offer a live captioning service. You can find that by clicking on the three dots and choosing Turn on Live Captions. Once the presentation is complete, we'll begin the question and answer portion in which participants can ask their questions aloud. The chat feature has been disabled for this meeting, so we'll be not taking written questions via the chat. Please hold your questions to the end. If you are on the phone, we will have instructions on how to ask questions at the conclusion of the presentation. We also encourage you to submit your comments and feedback to tonight's meeting using the online feedback form at the bottom of each of our repaving program web pages. You can give us written feedback or give us a call, and we'll also be able to address any questions you may have at the end of the presentation. Before we begin, I'd like to introduce Supervisor Kathy Smith from Sully District, as well as her Chief of Staff, Mike Coyle, to open this meeting. Supervisor Smith, would you like to make some opening remarks?
Thank you. I'm just happy we're having this meeting to inform the public about what's happening, and I look forward to their questions. Thank you.
Great. So next we're going to go to my colleague Steve Welch at the Virginia Department of Transportation, where he is the Assistant District Administrator. And he's going to go to, I'm going to stop sharing my slides here, and he's going to go over the 2023 repaving plan for the Sully District.
All right. Thank you, Zach. Give me a moment to share my screen. Okay, great. Let's see here. All right. All right. Can everyone see a screen that says VDOT 2023 paving plan up front?
Yes.
Okay, great. So I'm Steve Welch. I'm the Assistant District Administrator for Land Use and Transportation for the Northern Virginia District, and I'm here tonight to present our 2023 paving plan, which is something we do every year, and walk you through how we go about it. I won't go through the entire agenda, but you can see kind of here what things that we'll cover for tonight. In the interest of time, I'll just carry on to the next slide. So in Northern Virginia, we have over 14,000 lane miles of asphalt and paving. Our district in Northern Virginia consists of Prince William, Loudoun, Fairfax, and Arlington counties. Each year, so first of all, Fairfax County comprises of over 51% of those lane miles, where Loudoun is about 25%, Prince William is 22%, and Arlington is only 2%. The reason Arlington is only 2% is we manage only the interstates and some of the primary roadways, Route 1 in particular, in Arlington County, whereas Arlington County otherwise manages their own roadways. So 14,000 lane miles, we have over 7,500 lane miles in Fairfax County. So each year we start this process, and we are starting now in the construction season, which is typically April to about October, November. We got a head start this year because we've had such warm weather, which is a good thing for us. So we have gotten started a little bit early in March. But every year, our planning effort begins in the spring, summer, where we start gathering data for the next year. In the summer and the fall, we start reviewing that data, schedules. We start actually preparing contracts based on the neighborhoods, streets, and other roadways that we think meet the requirements for the following year repaving. And we advertise for bids, and we close out our prior contracts. And then in the winter, we receive the bids for the next year, which now we are starting to execute and get underway. So it's a Point is, it's a year-long process that takes place, even though you see the contractors out there from March, April to about October, November. So one of the questions that we always get is how are roads selected for paving? And, it's not a who complains the most or who inquires the most or who calls in the most. It really is a technical analysis. We do that based on pavement conditions, looking at traffic volumes. Another thing we take into considerations, or a couple things, is we try to avoid any known VDOT projects or locality projects that are coming that may end up tearing up the road anyway. We do hold meetings every midwinter with all the utility companies, meaning Washington Gas, water company, what have you, about any projects that they may have planned, so that we're not paving a road that they're going to turn around and cut back into because of having to upgrade utilities. And we also try to look for trying to group projects for economies of scale. Mainly it's mobilization costs, moving the equipment around from one site to the next. The other thing we look at is trying to do an entire neighborhood where we can, or where we think it's necessary. And if there's a little bit of money left over, we might do a main street in the adjoining or next neighborhood close to it for that same reason, economies of scale, as well as getting feedback from the maintenance crews. So how do we collect the data? This is always the interesting part. We have a truck that's similar to maybe you could call it a Google vehicle, but it's a Air automatic road analyzer, has cameras and measuring equipment. It measures pavement distress, roughness, texture, rutting. It does scanning of the roadway. We actually get video and measurements and take imagery and, of course, GPS along the way. And these trucks go around through all the roadways every year for most of our roadways to gather this data. And because every year the data actually changes, pardon my dog in the background, she's barking at a neighbor walking by. So we collect that data on interstate roads every year. We do so also on the primary roads like Route 1 and others on every year. And then on any high volume secondary road, which would be any that has average annual daily traffic, or AADT, of 3,500 vehicles per day or greater. And then on the other side of it, we collect about 20% of the low volume secondary roads, which are typically the neighborhood roads. And neighborhoods roads actually make up probably over half of our roadways. And so we do about 20% of those. So in other words, we gather the data on 100% of it every 5 years. So we look at what we call our critical condition index, or CCI, try to set goals for what we expect our pavement to last and what's most important. And obviously we have to keep our interstates and our primary roadways with very high volumes on it up to par. And then we work our way down to the high volume secondaries and then the neighborhood roads, with 60 being our lowest that we target for. We do have some examples in this figure over here about how the conditions kind of change a little bit with those ratings. I will say there are a lot, 40% of overall of the neighborhood roads are in the very poor condition. And that's in large part due to what we've been through with the recession back in the late 2000s and into the early 2015s, and the budget available to play catch up. So each year we establish our goals for that target requirement. And over here on the left side of the screen, if you can see my arrow, we set a 82% target for our interstates, our primaries, 75% for our low volume primaries, 82% for high volume secondaries, and then 60% for our low volume secondaries or neighborhood roads. And then in red, you can see where we've not quite yet met that requirement. So those are what we target when we put together the paving plan for the upcoming season, which is, of course, right now this season that we're talking about tonight. How do we do this? Well, in some cases, we do provide preventive maintenance where we do what's called a slurry seal. It's a lay down a type of latex material. Then we come back with our contractors come back with a very small stone that's brushed in, and then it's swept away. And it's a little bit of a lengthy process, but it does help the pavement statistically last about another 5 or 6 years overall. Most of our work, however, is, in our terminology as engineers, is plant mix, which is milling the roadway anywhere from 1 to 4 inches in depth, and then repaving that roadway with a new asphalt pavement. And on occasion, we find some roadways that are very bad that we end up having to do a full depth reconstruction of the pavement. I will say that only happens maybe on one roadway in our district in every season. So our budget is, of course, allocated by our Virginia General Assembly and how what's given to the state and Virginia Department of Transportation, and thus to our maintenance department to divide up about how we use it. The 2023 budget for our paving this year is $123 million, which is a little bit more than last year. But as we've all heard about with the certain economic conditions, our money is not going as far. So we are paving about 954 lane miles of roadway, which is quite a bit and on plane with the last 4 or 5 years. But it is coming out at 129,000 per lane mile versus prior years because of the inflationary pressures that we're all experiencing. One thing I did want to note is that over here in this, where we separate interstate, primary, and secondary, we are putting 80% of our maintenance money or reconstruction of pavement, repaving money on the secondary roadways. So overall, just one couple things. Our infrastructure maintenance teams have determined that roughly 43% of our low volume secondary roads, which are really our neighborhood roads, have ratings of 30s to 40s, which are very poor condition. We are playing catch up. We're doing the best we can with the budget that we have. At current funding levels, we pave about 6% of the road network each year. And we continue to catch up as we diligently as we can. Ultimately, if a road can't be repaved in this season, you can reach out to us and we will definitely have our maintenance crews come out and fill potholes. And in some cases, we'll do patching that's a full lane width and maybe 10 or 20 or 30 feet long, depending upon the condition in that area. So one thing I'm going to show you a little bit here in a couple of minutes is we have an interactive GIS paving plan. This map is actually a screenshot of what roads are getting paved in Northern Virginia this year. Everything in red is scheduled. Everything in green is in progress. And like I mentioned, we got an early start in March. And in some places, you'll see some blue where it's already been completed. And I will go back after I'm done with this and demonstrate how to use that paving status plan for a moment. Moving forward, I just wanted to mention that our paving contracts literally are paving contracts with paving and remarking. The contractors are hired to replace paving and replace in kind the existing striping that exists. We do pay them a little bit extra to make some minor adjustments where they add edge lines, the white lines along the sides of the roadway where they may have been missing previously. In some cases, we'll adjust crosswalks where they weren't quite lined up well. In some cases, we'll change what you see as 2-line or 2-bar crosswalks into high visibility crosswalks, which kind of is a pattern of a zebra pattern going across the roadway. And in other cases, occasionally, if there's room to do so with existing paving, we may lengthen a turn lane to add a little more storage, whether it's a right turn lane or particularly a left turn lane. But one of the things that's really important about this is the partnership that we've worked out with Fairfax County DOT, and that is that each year while we're going through this paving process, it creates the opportunity where Fairfax County wants to look at on-road bike networks, whether they're shared lanes, standard bike lanes, or buffered bike lanes. Also looking at places where we can put in new crosswalks or change over to high visibility crosswalks. What we call road diets. Road diets basically means that there may be some roadways, and there are some times where we have 4 lanes that are not really being used as much as they need to be, or the volume is not there. So we actually contract that down to 2 or 3 lanes and repurpose the existing lanes that are there. And Zach will be speaking a little bit more to that here shortly. And in some cases, statistically, we have found that typically we develop 12-foot lanes, but in high bus activity and truck activity areas, we'll keep those 12-foot lanes, but in other areas, we will reduce those down to 11 feet and make them a little bit more narrow. And that's because drivers kind of sense that they're a little bit tighter alley for them to drive in. And then they, statistically anyway, it shows that there are some minor decreases in speeds, which we all know has been a really big problem over the last couple of years, increases in speeds on our roadways. So that's a character tactic that we try to use to help with discouraging speeds above the speed limits. So after the presentation, if you want to, you can, if you need to have a problem with anything on a roadway, a pothole, what have you, you can reach us by myvdot.virginia.gov or at 1-800-4ROADS. So at this point, typically I back out, but I do want to just take one moment to back out of the program that I have and show you how that map works so that everyone here watching can see how to use it. So this is our GIS-based map that I showed you a static picture of earlier. So you can kind of zoom in or you can zoom out and kind of see what's going around, of course, across the rest of the state based on number of roadways and population, what have you. Focusing in on the Centerville area, you can see that there are certain neighborhoods along up here off of Braddock and along 28 and over in other areas. Up Waverly, I can see other neighborhoods in Chantilly that we're getting a lot of repaving in neighborhoods. As I mentioned, we're putting roughly 80% of our budget on neighborhood roads this year. So that's a good thing. One thing that this map is helpful with, if you have any questions, you can, like when the project is, when is it going to start versus maybe there's a problem going on while the project's happening. This map is made so that you can hover your arrow over it, click on the roadway, up will pop the name of the VDOT project manager, the phone number, and his or her email address, and also so the contractor that's out there working. So if you have a question about something that's going on, or if there's a problem or want to know when it's going to start, you can click to this tab on this feature, this map, and get that information, and that project manager will respond back to you as soon as they can, because they are out in the field moving around from site to site, watching and monitoring their contractors. So that's pretty much all I had for this evening, kind of covering the overall program, and I'll be glad to answer questions afterwards. For the meantime, I will back out of our display here and give me one moment and stop sharing so that Zach can take over from here. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Steve. All right, so next we're going to move over to Fairfax County and VDOT's proposed striping modifications. So as Steve said, this is a collaboration between VDOT and Fairfax County to improve traffic safety for all users. We begin by reviewing the draft repaving plan. We identify potential opportunities for improvements such as crosswalk markings, widened shoulders, adding bike lanes and adding turn lanes where appropriate. VDOT then develops the striping and sign plans and coordinates the implementation with the paving contractors. That's that paving itself that Steve was talking about. We at Fairfax County DOT then lead the public engagement in coordination with the supervisor. That's why we're here tonight. And then VDOT also identifies and reconstructs substandard curb ramps. And then Fairfax County will come in after the paving is done and install signage for bike lanes, road diets, or crosswalks. For crosswalks in particular, we will look for potential crossings for where people want to cross that don't currently have markings and determine whether it meets VDOT's warrants for safety. And if minor parking restrictions are needed to ensure that people walking in the crosswalk can be seen, as well as can also see oncoming traffic. VDOT will often upgrade existing crosswalk striping from standard to high visibility. And you can see how the example in the photo on the right, it shows a high visibility crosswalk, which typically looks like a piano keys or zebra stripes. We also identify potential crosswalks or future enhancements such as pedestrian refuge islands. And one of the things that Steve mentioned earlier is we look for potential, we look to potentially repurpose underutilized road space. So there are many roads throughout the county that were built for wider than needed travel lanes, or just have too many lanes, leading to potential safety issues such as speeding and intent driving. Repaving provides an opportunity to right-size travel lanes and roads and potentially provide new bike lanes and turn lanes to improve safety for all users at very low cost. We typically we strive to maintain the traffic capacity at signals as well as on-street parking. This also aids us in implementing our planned bike network. So, for example, one of the streets that we previously had added bike lanes to down in Mason District is on Annandale Road. Before it was a fairly wide road, so people driving felt they could drive very quickly. By narrowing the lanes to the minimum widths acceptable, we were able to reduce some of that speeding. So as we discussed earlier, these are the three types of bicycle infrastructure that we implement during the repaving program. So we'll do shared lane markings, we'll do a standard bike lane, and we'll also do a buffered bike lane. The buffered bike lane provides a little bit extra space for people biking between cars and themselves. There are several types of bicycle riders that we often see through Fairfax County. The primary users of standard bike lanes are the strong and fearless and the enthused and confident. But when we are able to do trails or buffered bike lanes, we can get some of the interested but concerned, about half of potential cyclists to use those types of lanes. Well, bicycle infrastructure clearly benefits people biking. There are also a lot of benefits for people driving. So if you're trying to cross the street, you have a little bit extra space for you to step out to before crossing into the travel lane. If you're a pedestrian, it adds a buffer. If you're walking along a sidewalk, it'll add a nice little buffer between you and the moving traffic. Since the bike lanes typically will narrow the road, it will reduce speeding and also decrease noise. Since faster driving typically results in louder noise. And they also improve visibility for people trying to get in and out of their driveways, as well as shopping centers and those kind of places. So we have two proposed bike lanes in Sully District. One of them is on Metrotech Drive, and the other one was on Elmwood Street. Metrotech is dark green, and Elmwood is in bright green. So Metro Track Drive, as you may be familiar with, runs between Route 50 and Centerville Road. There are 4 travel lanes today. There are sidewalks on both sides, except for one little short block between Route 50. And there are currently no on-street bicycle facilities. What we propose to do is we would do a road diet by repurposing 2 of the 4 travel lanes. So there'd only be 1 travel lane in each direction. It would look very similar to Bluemont Way in Reston, where the county and VDOT also did a road diet several years ago. So what you would have is you would have a bike lane on the far right. You'd have a buffer where space is available. Then you'd have a center turn lane. So that center turn lane would get people out of that flow of traffic and keep that main travel lane free so that people can keep going without significantly decreasing the capacity of the roadway. One of the things that we've heard about this particular section of MetroTech is how difficult it is to enter and exit the shopping center. That left turn lane would be able to help people get in and out of the flow of traffic, so that they can safely make a left turn. If you're trying to make a left turn and you're trying to watch for 2 lanes of traffic instead of 1, this proposal would help you because you don't have to look for 1 flow of cars coming at you instead of 2. And it improves safety for people driving, as well as also providing a bicycle connection between the neighborhoods around this shopping center. So people can go through the shopping center area and into the other residential neighborhoods. So we have a draft study, and we're working with our colleagues at VDOT, such as Steve, to help finalize that study and interpret the results. So if you drive on MetroTech today, you'll probably note that it does take a while to get through the intersection at Route 50. That's because there's a lot more people traveling on Route 50, and so the signal cycle there is pretty long, and that's going to create delays. Since we're proposing, in order to mitigate what we're trying to do and ensure that the road diet provides the same amount of capacity there is today, we're pretty much going to keep that intersection with Route 50 is the same. So that we don't significantly exacerbate the delay that there is today. And moving further down the street on MetroTech down to Lightfoot Street, we're proposing to add a new crosswalk. This would connect the neighborhood to the shopping center and provide the only mid-block crosswalk on MetroTech Drive. You can see this is the existing configuration where you'd have to cross 4 lanes of traffic. We would, if we are able to get the road diet through, you'd only have to cross the bike lanes, and then you'd have to cross the 1 travel lane at a time, and then the center turn lane. So it'll feel a little bit safer than it is there today. And then going down across the street, we wanted to provide a connection between the neighborhood south of MetroTech Drive to MetroTech and through to the other neighborhoods. And so we're proposing to narrow this very wide part of Elmwood Street by adding bike lanes. There's sidewalks on both sides. Over time, the street parking there's no street parking there today. Of course, there are no bicycle facilities. And as I mentioned earlier, the intersection configuration would remain the same. So we still have the same number of turn lanes. A right turn lane, you'd have 3 lanes, and then you'd have a left turn lane. And the bike lanes that we would propose to add would be buffered. So you'd have a nice space between you and moving traffic. And then going a little bit further down Elmwood Street, we have a proposed crosswalk at the intersection of Elmwood and Rockland Village Drive. We're proposing in order to make it safe for people to use this crosswalk, we need to restrict some parking on the southbound side of the street. So we'd have to we would propose to put up a sign to prohibit parking for those last 3 spaces on Elmwood Street. So if you have any paving related comments, such as drainage, such as missing signage, signal repair, walkway repair, site distance issues due to vegetation, it is the springtime, our vegetation is growing. Feel free to submit them to my.vdot.virginia.gov. If you'd like to request repairs, feel free to click on the I Need a Road Repair link at that portal, or you can also give VDOT a call at 1-800-376-7623. If you have any feedback related to the presentation that I just gave, you can submit that electronically by emailing dotbicycleprograms@fairfaxcounty.gov, or you can click on the feedback form in the red box at the bottom of the project page. We'll be accepting your feedback through May 2nd. And now we're going to move to our question and answer session. We're going to open it up to questions and try to answer any questions you may have. To ask a question, please use the reactions feature and to click raise your hand at the top of your screen. If you're calling in from the telephone and would like to ask a question, please press *5 to raise your hand. When you're finished your question, please lower your hand. Please unmute yourself when your name is called and ask your question or provide your comment. Please mute yourself after you've asked your question. As I mentioned before, if you're on the phone, press *5 to raise your hand. When you're called upon by the last 4 digits of your phone number, press *6 to unmute yourself. After you're finished, please press *6 to mute yourself again and press *5 to lower your hand.
Thank you, Zach. And we have the first question. Dana Stewart, I will enable your microphone. Right. You should be able to unmute yourself. You will need to press the unmute button at the top of the screen.
And for whatever reason, if you have technical difficulties and can't get to us today, feel free to just send us an email at dotbicycleprograms with your question, and we'll be happy to answer it that way.
Try disabling your microphone and enabling it again in case that helps. Right. If you go to the upper right corner and click on your microphone symbol. Looks like Dana has some technical difficulties. Are there any other questions? If we have no other questions except Dana, I will try again to allow your microphone. Unfortunately, I cannot unmute you. You will need to unmute yourself.
Perhaps you could allow the chat feature for a momentarily that she could input her question. Is that possible, Nicole?
I can make Dana a presenter temporarily, and maybe that helps. Hold on 1 second. Right. You can try unmuting yourself now.
It worked.
Oh, great! Thank you.
Yeah, sorry, it was faded out, and I couldn't undo that. So thank you for the presentation, and thank you for working with me so that I could ask my question. This has to do with the paving of the neighborhoods. I recognize that you're behind due to the problems of the world, but do you have some type of timeline in mind, or when you're going to get into some of the other neighborhoods in the Sully district? Our neighborhood is not on the target list for this year, and our roads are deteriorating. So we're just curious as a neighborhood, is this a 5-year plan? Is it going to be sooner than that? We don't have potholes, we have deterioration of the road.
Yeah, this is Steve Welch from VDOT. I understand the The challenge here is that we have approximately 40% of the neighborhood roads are in poor to very poor condition. The budget that's allocated to us annually just allows us to address about 6% of the overall total roads around the state every year. So we get a portion for our district, then that district's divided up to each county and what roadways within the county. To answer your question about in the 5-year plan or 3-year plan or what have you, each year that changes. Every year we have to evaluate a road. So one year one road might rate as a 45 or 50, where another road rates at 40. But the next year, that one that rated at 45 actually drops all the way down, perhaps to a 35 below the one, while the other road that maintains staying at a 40. And the reason for that is that some of our roads in Northern Virginia, I know that's particularly inside the Beltway, and we're outside the Beltway, but a lot of the roads are based on a foundation that might have been at one time a horse trail or a gravel road that was paved over and then paved over again and again and again, and doesn't necessarily have the proper drainage underneath. So that causes changes in the condition of the roadway depending upon how new or old it is, when it was built, and the type of soils that it's on. And I don't mean to get too technical on you, but that's the reason why we rate the roadways every single year, because we're always chasing the bottom end, if you will, the 30 and 40 range, and 45 if we can to get to it. But we are playing a little bit of catch up. Unfortunately, we don't have an endless, amount of funds. The funds are based on maintenance funds that are allocated to the state by the Virginia General Assembly, and then how they're divided up in Virginia with VDOT for maintenance of bridges and structures and culverts and drainage and pavement and snow and other things. So that is how we have to look at it each year, is how much we can put towards roadways. As I mentioned, we're putting 80% this year towards neighborhood roads, and we're trying to do that as best we can every single year to catch up. Pavement generally lasts anywhere from 8 to 20 years, depending upon how well the bases are. So if you think about it in that perspective, 6% each year, and it's, we're only getting the roadways of 12% or 10% of the roadways are getting addressed, or in this case 6% we're talking about, then we're actually taking care of a certain number of them. But at the other end of it, there are others that are starting to decrease in there as well. But so it's constantly chasing that low end. But we're doing our best to catch up. We have made progress over the last 6-7 years. In the meantime, we will certainly address any problems that are on your roadway as far as potholes or really bad areas, and do patches that are much larger than potholes.
Steve, this is Mike. Dana, if you're still on, can you identify which community the roads are in?
All right, let me make Dana a presenter again. Right, go ahead, Dana.
Thank you. We're off Rifle Ridge, so we have a red rating. Rifle Ridge is off Vale, so it's more towards Vienna, Hunter Mill, that side of Fairfax. But I have a question. Thank you for asking me a question. I have a follow-up question. On the maps that you were showing, are the percentages indicated on the map based on the quality of the road, or is that internal agency information?
We have that as data that's in a database. We don't have, we used to be able to keep up with updating our pavement condition map, but for the last 3 years, we have not been able to keep up on the actual condition map because the conditions change on every single roadway. And like I said, we have over 14,000 lane miles in Northern Virginia, but we do have that information. So if you reach out to us via tonight, we can check into the roadway that you're talking about, and our infrastructure team will be able to tell us whether your particular road rates a 30 or 40, 50, 60, whatever it is, and that'll at least give you some idea how it stands.
Great, thank you so much.
No problem.
Thank you, Dana.
And
we have
Steve,
oh, go ahead.
I'm sorry, it's Mike Coyle again. I just wanted to say, you know, Supervisor Smith's office, we've heard from some of the folks there, like off of Rifle Ridge, I think it's Timber Lake, and I'm drawing a blank on the other street. And so I know that we have conveyed that information to VDOT to ask them to review it, but Dana, I think getting, you know, what the rating is will probably help give you a better idea of where your street is. Thanks, Nicole.
Thank you, Steve. Let me change Dana's status again. And we have another question from caller 9547. Let me allow your microphone, and you will need to press *6 to unmute yourself.
Hello?
Yes, we can hear you.
Hi.
Please ask your question.
Okay. My name is Elizabeth, and I live in Rockland Village. Elmwood Street has given us so many issues. And Mike Coyle can tell you that I constantly ask him to have a crew come out and fix the potholes on Elmwood. But they don't last very long, and maybe after 6 months, the pothole is there again. Is there something that can be done to strengthen the road?
So yes, this is Steve Welch from VDOT. Yes, Mike, if you could forward to me that location that it is being described, we can do a larger patch, ask our maintenance crews to go out and do a bigger patch than just a pothole patch. And usually that means saw cutting like a 10 by 10 or 20 by 20 area and then repaving it with equipment. So yes, we can do that.
I just want to add to,
thank you for
Elmwood Street is going to be repaved as part of this next round. I'm going to go back to the first map here. So
right.
The section between Route 50 and into Rockland Village is going to be repaved. So hopefully that'll alleviate some of those pothole issues with brand new asphalt.
Now, I have my second question is, are they going to disrupt our one-side parking? Because over 20 years ago, we requested that we just have one-side parking on Elmwood.
So we're going. So the only section that we are proposing to remove 3 parking spaces is if you're going southbound on Elmwood Street and you get to the intersection of Rockland Village Drive. In order to install the new crosswalk, we need to remove 3 parking spaces on that southbound side of the street. So just north of the intersection of, it's on the southbound side, just north of the Rockland Village Drive intersection. And we'll post the presentation for you tomorrow to look at as well and provide your feedback on that.
Hey, Zach, can you, since you have control of the screen, can you just explain the site distance requirement and why those spaces need to be removed?
Oh, yes, absolutely. Yeah, so in order to make it safe for people to cross the street, we want to make sure that people driving can see you. So the reason we picked 3 spaces is because that's the minimum amount of sight distance that the person driving will be able to see you and stop in time for you if you're using the crosswalk. If you're using the crosswalk too, it also helps you see oncoming traffic. So that's why we're proposing to remove those 3 spaces.
Thank you, Zach. And I don't see any other questions.
Okey-doke. All right. So this concludes our meeting on the 2023 repaving program in Sully District. A recording of the meeting will be available on the 2023 repaving webpage in the next day or so. Thank you very much for joining us tonight. We really appreciate your time and participation. Have a great evening.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.